Welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones, and we are so glad to have you here. New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez, fresh off a guilty conviction on federal bribery charges, is getting ready to step down on August 20th. So what happens once he officially resigns, and what legal troubles are ahead for Menendez? Attorney and former New Jersey Legislator John Wisniewski is standing by to break it all down for us. First, though, former New Jersey Governor Christie Whitman is here to talk about her involvement with the Forward Party and also with reaction to the latest political news. Governor Christie Whitman, welcome to the show. It's so good to see you.
It's good to be with you.
Well, let's start with some big news this week. Vice President Kamala Harris has selected Minnesota Governor Tim Walz to be her running mate. Let me get your reaction.
Well, I'm delighted, first of all, she's picked a governor, because I like to know that there's somebody who is there, can back her up, who has experience in actually administrating a state, administrating a government. So I'm very, very pleased with that. And while I like Josh Shapiro a lot, I understand the concerns that she might have had. But Tim Walz is a very popular governor in his state. He's a veteran. He's been in the National Guard. He's been a school teacher, a football coach. He's a real American. And I think he's going to do well on the ticket.
Well, let me also ask about your recent endorsement of Kamala Harris for president over Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is a New Jersey, lives here, had businesses here. So let me ask you, and you worked with him as governor, as a business owner, him as a business owner, casino owner in New Jersey. So let me ask why your pick for Kamala Harris?
Well, from those very days early on, watching him what he did in Atlantic City, I knew he was not fit to be president of the United States. And that's why I was chair, actually, of the Republicans for Biden in the last go-round. And this time I'm proud because, there isn't a Republican Party today's Republican Party is not the Republican Party in which I grew up. We used to have principles. We used to have standards. We weren't misogynists. We weren't racist. We weren't people who hid from the world. We engaged in international trade and worked with allies to keep ourselves safe, help them do the job across the seas so that we didn't have to do it ourselves. All the things that Donald Trump doesn't like, all the things that he has said he is going to undo. And for me, the biggest thing is respect for the rule of law and the Constitution. That used to be the basic principle of both parties, actually. But we've moved away from that. And that's actually, frankly, that's why I believe we need a third party. But until we have Forward on every state and recognized as a national party, I'm going to do everything I can to keep Donald Trump out of the White House.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your involvement with the Forward Party, the alternative to the two-party system. On the socials, it says it's not right, it's not left, it's just forward, a new and better way to do politics. So can you talk about how the Forward Party is involved in the presidential election and also other local elections? How are you even working on some races here in New Jersey?
Sure. Well, first of all, we're not involved in the presidential at all. We may individually, as I have been, obviously, with the Harris team, but as a party, Forward Party, we're not involved in the presidential. Our focus is state and local, because what we're doing is building a party that's going to stand the test of time. And like a house, you have to have a good foundation. Plus the fact that those offices, the local offices, the local sheriffs, in some cases, they elect those. Your school board members, your library commission, your state assembly and Senate candidates, your governor, your mayors, all of those offices are the places where the decisions that most immediately impact you are made. And they're very important. And especially after this election, even though we're not playing in the presidential and picking a candidate or anything, what we're looking at is people who they have to sign a pledge. We don't have a party platform in the sense that people are used to, because our party platform is a platform of principles. And any candidate that wants to get our endorsement, besides the fact that we vet them very thoroughly at both the state, local, and at the national level, they have to sign a pledge that says, I will uphold the rule of law, I will respect the Constitution, I will work with anyone to solve problems, I'll create a safe space for the discussion of controversial issues, and I'll work constantly to open the process so that anyone who is legally able to vote gets to vote. And then it's up to the candidate and to the state to decide, well, what are the important issues in my state? What do my constituents want? Not what a party in Washington wants. And that's how we got to where we are today, where, frankly, now people are enthusiastic about, more people are enthusiastic about the Harris-Walz ticket, or will be as they get to know Tim Walsh. But they don't want Donald Trump. They didn't want Joe Biden. That's what happens when you have two parties that are so controlling. And that's why I believe we need a third one. We're recognized as a party in 7 states now, and we'll have candidates across the country. We do have a Forward New Jersey party. You can go to forwardnewjersey.com and find that. Otherwise, we're forward.com, but forwardparty.com, excuse me. But I don't know. We haven't fully vetted. We're still in the process of vetting candidates. We hope to have about 200 across the country by the time we're finished. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of them weren't in New Jersey.
Yeah, and when it comes to the Forward Party, you don't have to say, I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, I'm not, right? You can stay who you are. And I think that that's where a lot of people are struggling. You know, when you go out and talk to people, they will say, you know, I'm a Republican, but I don't like what the party is standing for now. Right. Or I'm a Democrat and I don't like what this, you know, I don't want to be pigeonholed into this particular message or only one viewpoint. So can you talk a little bit about who the people are, who you're getting involved with? And again, you know, that they don't have to say, well, I'm not abandoning my principles as a Democrat or as a Republican.
Right. We will support Republicans, Democrats, Independents, as you say, as long as they sign our pledge. And that's where our candidates are coming from. There are some that have been independent, but most of them are coming from the Democratic or Republican parties and saying just a pox on both your houses. I don't like the choices I'm getting, or I don't like, for instance, we have a state senator, Senator Williams in Philadelphia, who is a Democrat, but he liked the idea of school choice. His constituents wanted school choice. And the Democratic Party there wanted nothing to do with it. So he said, okay, that's it. I'm going to be a forward Democrat, which means I will still caucus with you as Democrats. But when I see an issue that I believe in that you don't want me to talk about, forget it. I am going to talk about it. And I'll have the support of the people, the forward people in my state. Yeah. And so that's what gives us the strength to be able to say to these candidates, to give them the freedom to be who they want to be. And they can be real Republicans or real Democrats. That's fine. But they have to sign the pledge, and they have to, we check out their record very carefully to ensure that they will be the type of person who will live up to that.
Yeah. And again, because Joe Biden dropped out, you know, prior to that, there were a lot of people saying, I don't want to, like, as you mentioned, I don't want to vote for either one of them. So what type of messaging do you think is going to be resonating with the voters and voters here in New Jersey as well come November?
Well, one of the things we're looking at is, since we're not endorsing as a party a presidential candidate, and we are focusing on state and local, and there will be still many people who are not going to want to vote for either candidate. But if they decide to stay home, but then they see a local candidate whom they like and respect, and they're forwardists and they've signed that pledge, and they say, okay, I really like this, and I'm going to go vote for them. What history has shown that they then tend to stay on the ballot and move up through the other offices looking for similar candidates. And, you know, it doesn't matter who wins this election. We know there are going to be lawsuits after it. Doesn't matter. There will be. So it's really important that we have states attorneys general, secretaries of states, local commissioners, all those people who deal with the aftermaths of election, being people who have sworn to uphold the Constitution and respect the rule of law. And so that's one of the things we're working on that will hopefully bring more people to the polls, which is what's important. At the end of the day, you want more people voting. We got into the mess we're in now and allowed the two parties to become extreme because the majority of voters didn't vote in primaries. It was a 10% voter turnout. It was the average, 10 to 12%. That's just pathetic. And that means what you're getting is the most partisan, most, I won't say rabid, but the most committed to certain issues, and they tended to be more extreme. And we just kept saying, okay, well, I can't bother. It's a primary. What difference does it make? Won't bother to go to the polls. And so they became more and more entrenched on both sides. So both parties started to get pushed by their extremes because then they gerrymandered to a place where they were, the only thing they had to worry about was their primaries. The only people who were coming out in primaries were the most partisan, tending to be on the extreme end. And so it just built on itself.
Yeah, well, let me ask you, following up on that, just what's happened over the past year in New Jersey. Bob Menendez indicted, convicted. In the meantime, you have somebody like Andy Kim who came in and he really rallied against those party lines. And for the viewers, that's kind of inside baseball where the party bosses, more or less, each county would endorse a candidate,
Right.
get them that preferential treatment. But on the Democratic side, those county lines are gone this year. So can you talk a little bit about what you think those ramifications, is that going to be opening up some more doors for other candidates to have a shot to be more competitive as opposed to some of those party boss favorites?
Absolutely. No question about it. And I wish it would happen on the Republican side. And I say that as someone who definitely benefited from the process. I'm going to be upfront about that. I benefited from it. But I think it's wrong for democracy, and we should move away from it. And the fact that this has happened to the Democrats, now the Republicans ought to go the same way and open up the process. Most of the time you go to the polls, if you're in these very Republican districts, let's say, you have no choice. I mean, I go to the vote in primaries, and I voted the Republican ticket because I'm still a registered Republican because Forward isn't a party yet in New Jersey. And I don't have a choice. I mean, very rarely is there somebody in a primary running against the chosen candidate.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me ask you, just as we're running out of time here, there's talk about New Jersey becoming a little bit more competitive, and I know you're not the Forward Party isn't involved in the presidential election, but when it comes to the state races, because New Jersey again could be a little bit more competitive, Andy Kim versus Curtis Bashaw, do you think that there could be more room for Curtis Bashaw to be competitive against Andy Kim? What do you, just your thoughts on that? Because, Curtis Bashaw is somebody who worked for former Governor Jim McGreevey. He has good relationships with Democrats and Republicans. He doesn't seem to be, one extreme or the other. So do you think that could be a little bit more competitive?
I frankly think every race is going to be more competitive this year where you have challengers, because the whole election cycle has gotten so much attention with all that's gone on at the presidential level. I suspect, at least I hope, people are really paying attention now and will get to the polls to vote in those elections. And the more people you get out, the more competitive those races are.
Yeah. Well, former Governor Christie Whitman, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us about the news as it is breaking and also about the upcoming election. We look forward to having you back on again and talking more about the Forward Party. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Love to do it.
New Jersey's U.S. Senator Bob Menendez is stepping down on August 20th after being found guilty on federal corruption charges. Here now to explain the process and what is next is attorney and former New Jersey Legislator John Wisniewski. Good to see you. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me back on. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's always a pleasure. Now, before we get to talk about the senator, I want to first get your reaction to the news this week. Kamala Harris, her vice presidential pick is Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. What are your thoughts?
I think it's a great, inspired choice. The Democratic Party has been fortunate to have a very deep bench of governors and U.S. senators. And up until now, there's really been very little opportunity for them to move forward and show themselves on a national stage. And the departure of President Biden from this race, elevating Kamala Harris as the presidential nominee, has now opened up that logjam. And Governor Walz has a really outstanding record as governor. And his governmental experience as a chief executive is going to provide for President Harris the kind of backup that Joe Biden provided for President Obama.
Yeah. A week can be a lifetime in politics. So just look where we were, just a few weeks ago. And also, again, now as we shift into talking about Senator Bob Menendez, first let me ask, were you surprised that he actually ended up resigning effective August 20th? Did you think he was going to hold on as long as possible until his seat ran out in January?
I think that was his goal, but I also was mindful of the experience of former U.S. Senator Harrison Williams, and he stayed on after his conviction up until the point in time that the Senate was poised to vote to expel him. And with the announcement by Senator Booker and the convening or the potential convening of a committee to introduce articles to remove him, Senator Menendez saw the handwriting on the wall and knew he needed to get out, at least on this way. He got out on his own terms. He chose his departure date as August 20th, which I don't know why he chose that date, but certainly gave him the ability to finish up whatever business he was working on in the Senate and to leave under his own terms.
Yeah, and I'd asked around as well, trying to find out, was there a specific reason for August 20th? And it was, the answer I kept getting was, well, that was just the date picked. So again, he could tie up loose ends before he leaves. So now that he's made that announcement, when a U.S. Senator resigns, here in New Jersey, what kind of process is now triggered? Because this is the first time we've dealt with this.
Right, so the governor of the state of New Jersey has the unilateral power to pick the successor, and he can pick that successor irrespective of party or any other criteria. And so it's a blank slate for Governor Murphy to fill. And the speculation, in New Jersey, politics is a speculative sport. Everybody has an opinion about what may happen, what could happen, and there's no end to the list of potential U.S. senators. But I think the strong opinion is that his former chief of staff, George Helmy, is likely to be the caretaker U.S. senator.
Right. And that's something that Governor Murphy has said. He is not going to pick somebody who is going to be competitive. He's going to pick somebody who is a caretaker. So can you just talk a little bit about the impact that that replacement then would have on the seat, considering they'd be in office for just a few months?
Yeah, they'll be in office for 5 months. It's really following the tradition that New Jersey has followed over the last several years. We had Senator Nicholas Brady, who was a caretaker. We had Senator Jeff Chiesa, who was a caretaker. And now it looks like we'll have Senator George Helmy, who will be a caretaker up until this point in time, August 20th, when whoever it is will take office. New Jersey really has effectively had only one U.S. senator. Bob Menendez has been consumed in his defense at his criminal trial, really taking him off the playing field, removing him as chair of the Foreign Relations Committee. And so the biggest impact this will have is that New Jersey will have two fully functioning U.S. senators through the end of this term, I think, which is important for New Jersey's standing nationally.
Yeah. Let me also play the other side here. New Jersey is a very blue state. Andy Kim is running for the seat. So what about the argument, why not appoint somebody who is running for the U.S. Senate? He has the ability, he's a Democrat, to appoint that. What would be the risk in doing so?
Well, I think the mantra, if you will, within political circles, it's a little bit like the Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm. Andy Kim looks like a pretty strong bet to win the election in November, now that Bob Menendez is no longer going to be a potential third-party candidate in that race. And so why offer the Republicans that talking point that the governor gave Andy Kim an unfair advantage several months before the term would begin? Look, yeah, it would be to New Jersey's advantage to have Andy Kim sworn in now. He would have seniority over all of the incoming freshman senators. But I think to deprive the Republicans of that talking point, that point of criticism, if you will, is probably a far smarter political move than any minor advantage that Andy Kim would get by being appointed the U.S. senator.
So governor is taking the high road and not playing politics with this, even though he can. I mean, New Jersey's governor is one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful, gubernatorial office in the country.
he can play politics, but I would suggest that appointing Andy Kim would be akin to a very Trumpian move. And I think it's more democratic to let the voters pick the next U.S. senator and have a caretaker in the interim.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the legal troubles that are now facing Senator Bob Menendez. He's found guilty of taking bribes and acting as a foreign agent. What happens? What happens next? What do you think? Do you think he's actually going to end up possibly in prison, because for each charge, there's significant jail time, and analysts were saying, again, if he is the maximum and they run back to back, it could be over 200 years in prison. So what do you think happens next in the legal process, realistically?
So, yeah, first of all, assuming that the conviction stands as is, whether they withdraw their appeal or they continue with it and they lose the appeal, they're never going to stack all of those sentences end to end for somebody like Bob Menendez. I think what they will want, the prosecution will really insist on, is that there'll be some incarceration, some time in jail, whether it's 1 year or 5 years or something in between, which will be a signal to other would-be lawbreakers that there is no get out of jail free card. But let's not forget that the U.S. Supreme Court has significantly constrained the ability of prosecutors to keep in place convictions for fraud. Governor McDonald in Virginia was convicted, and the U.S. Supreme Court threw out that charge, essentially creating a very gray, shady zone in which it is not totally impermissible to take gifts as long as the gift can be excluded from some type of deliberate quid pro quo. And the appeal that I would imagine the Menendez people will be looking at is based on that Supreme Court precedent.
Yeah. And as far as I understood it, he already had an appeals attorney lined up before the conviction, just getting ready. Is that typical in a criminal case such as this?
Well, it's certainly a signal that you know that the jury is likely not to buy your defense. So not a sign of confidence in his trial team, but finding the right appeal attorney who's going to be able to successfully take this potentially all the way through the U.S. Supreme Court. There are not a lot of them who are sitting around idle. You need to get one as soon as you can so that you can secure that time. And so I think that was part of the decision making here. They wanted to make sure they had the best defense team and also the best appellate team, and they wanted to get those on board early. Plus, your appellate attorneys will help you with creating the kind of record you need at trial to help make a successful appeal.
Yeah. And can you just talk a little bit about, again, the senator, he's getting up there in age, he's 70 years old, any time served in prison, at a certain age, that's got to be taken into consideration as well. But when you look about his legacy and what people remember of him, what do you think that will be, whether or not he ends up serving prison time?
Unfortunately, I think with this conviction, no matter how it turns out, the legacy of Bob Menendez will be that he was convicted. And all of the good works that came before that are going to be eclipsed by this one fact. The same thing is true of former U.S. Senator Harrison Williams, who did enormously good things for the state of New Jersey. Many people may not remember that the Metro Park train station at one point was called the Harrison Williams Metro Park train station, his name removed after his conviction. And so similar things will happen, and all already happening. One school district has announced that they will remove Senator Menendez's name from a school building that was named in his honor. And so this will be the defining act of his time in office, which is ironic because his start in office started around the conviction of his mentor, Senator William Musto. And so it's almost kind of a full circle thing.
Yeah. It's again, it's not his first time being accused, and you never know how a jury is going to come back, and then you don't know how a judge is going to rule. And then again, the appeals process, it could drag it out for some time. Just final thoughts here.
Well, they could, and certainly appeals have no, trials have very rigid time frame rules. Appeals are a little less so. And but it's important to remember that the appeal is not about the facts anymore. Whatever the facts the jury decided stand unchanged, immutable throughout this appeal. What the lawyers will be arguing is that the judge got the law wrong, that the instructions given to the jury were wrong, that the motions they made for dismissal based on the McDonald precedent were wrong. And so this is really going to be an argument about the law, how the law was applied, how the trial judge got it wrong. And I think that given the fact that the U.S. Supreme Court seems to have a very soft spot for corruption these days, given the corruption of its members, I am concerned that the McDonald precedent might provide some daylight between the conviction and what Senator Menendez hopes to achieve.
John Wisniewski, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. Always a pleasure.
Good to be with you again. Thank you, Laura.
And that will do it for today. I'm Laura Jones. Thanks so much for watching New Jersey Politics. We look forward to seeing you back here next time.